I'm just saying that it's time for you to leave. These words, uttered with such ease that it seemed as if they carried only a simple statement of fact, and not a challenge, pierced the silence that hung in the air like a knife. Sophia stared at the other man without blinking. Her face remained impassive, although her heart was beating fast and unevenly. There was something inexpressibly alien in that look, as if she were talking to a reflection of herself, something that she had always sought to suppress and hide. Can't you look at yourself in the mirror and feel awkward? Her voice was low, but there was power in every word. She knew that the truth she was sharing was painful, but it was necessary. For too long, she had allowed his presence to undermine her inner peace, destroying the fragile harmony she had worked so hard to create. I'm embarrassed for you, Sophia continued, and her words echoed in the room. Yes, you're embarrassing me, and rest assured, you're embarrassing everyone around you. She glanced towards the window, beyond which she could see the city waking up to a new day. The city where she was known as a successful, unwavering leader, CEO of a large company. However, at this moment she felt not so much strong and confident, but vulnerable to herself, to a man who, once seemed close, now became an outsider. Even my close friends, my boss, they all look at me and think, how could I be here next to you? There was no anger in her voice, only bitterness. You've become part of the family, and that upsets me the most. She paused, as if giving importance to the last words, before getting up from her wheelchair and picking up the schedule that lay on the edge of the table. Sophia, despite her physical disability, was an incredibly strong person. She grew up in a loving family, surrounded by the care of her parents and her brother David, who, although sometimes overprotective, always supported her. It was this love that gave her the strength to overcome obstacles, to build her life against all odds. Now that her parents had left this world, she was left with only David, the only person with whom she shared her childhood and memories of home. Her life has changed. Now she was the CEO of her own company, a successful woman who didn't take anything easy. Behind each of her successes was hard work, perseverance, and an endless desire to prove to herself and the world that appearance and physical limitations are not an obstacle. I studied hard, and I didn't rely on luck, she reflected, running her eyes over the monthly schedule that the secretary had given her. Every victory was given with sweat and blood, but now I'm reaping the fruits of my efforts. Her thoughts were interrupted by the ringing of the phone. Hi, David, her brother's voice was always soothing. He was an island of stability for her in this stormy sea of obligations and responsibilities. I'm sorry to bother you when you're busy, he began with slight embarrassment, but I wanted to tell you something important. I'm getting married. These words took Sophia by surprise. David had always been so career-focused, and she hadn't even suspected that he'd met someone. Congratulations, she replied, trying to hide her slight confusion. We met at work, David continued, his voice sounding happy. They cook great and take great care of the house. I'm so happy for you, David, Sophia felt a warmth spreading in her chest. It was happiness mixed with a slight sadness. When is the wedding? In 5 months, he replied. The wedding day came, and as soon as Sophia drove up to the venue, she immediately felt the atmosphere of tension and some hidden drama that was in the air. The celebration, which was supposed to be a celebration of love and happiness, seemed to be painted in completely different tones. Her heart was beating in time with her restless thoughts. Sophia had never seen her brother's fiancée before today. David was busy, as was she, and their careers and affairs were so absorbing that there was almost no time for face-to-face meetings. As Sophia was preparing to enter the hall, she heard a voice behind her. Hey, wait a minute. She turned around, and a tall woman with a bold look stood in front of her. Are you talking to me? Sophia asked politely. Obviously, isn't it? The woman replied with a slight sneer in her voice, crossing her arms over her chest. Her posture betrayed confidence, and there was something icy in her eyes. I'm the bride, the star of tonight's show. The words, spoken so simply, left Sophia with a slight feeling of discomfort. This was not the meeting she had expected. However, she replied with dignity. "Nice to meet you. I am Sophia, David's sister." The woman in front of her raised her eyebrows and, without hiding her irritation, barely nodded in response. "My name is Nicole." Sophia studied her carefully. Externally, Nicole was flawless. Her elegant dress perfectly emphasized her figure, and her makeup was perfect. But there was something strange about her behavior. She seemed tense, almost hostile, and that instantly alerted Sophia. "What's wrong with this woman?" Nicole suddenly said sharply, turning her head in Sophia's direction. "I can't believe it." "I'm sorry, what do you mean?" Sophia asked in surprise, feeling a wave of unpleasant forebodings grow in her chest. "Don't touch me, please," Nicole continued, pulling back a step, as if trying to keep her distance. "No one told me that David has a sister like you." The words sounded like an accusation. Sophia tried to understand what could have caused such aggression. "I knew he had a sister, but not like that," Nicole added, her gaze full of contempt. "I had no idea," she continued, "why no one warned me about this." Sophia stood motionless, realizing that in front of her was a man who was not just unfriendly, but had an outright dislike for her. It hurt, but she kept her cool. "What happened to you?" Nicole continued, and there was hidden anger in her voice. "I can't believe you're his sister." "It's another matter. What if you infect me with something?" Sophia barely restrained herself from responding sharply. But she said with restraint, "Please calm down. There's nothing I can infect you with." But Nicole wouldn't let up. "Shut up. Your droplets are spreading." These words sounded humiliating. Sophia took a deep breath, trying to keep her balance, even though everything was boiling inside. "I can't believe that people like you exist. It's just terrible to find out about it on the wedding day. The worst that could have happened." Sophia was silent. She knew she shouldn't escalate the situation on this important day for her brother, but Nicole's words cut to the heart. "David and I will get married, and I will have to deal with you, whether I like it or not," Nicole continued, as if reading the text from a script written by herself. "If people find out that you are my daughter-in-law, I will be humiliated in front of everyone. Have you ever thought about it? Think a little. Aren't you ashamed to be yourself?" Sophia felt anger slowly rising inside her, but she tried to keep herself in check. "You're embarrassing me. Yes, it's all embarrassing. Even my friends and boss are here, and I'm embarrassed that they'll find out that you're part of my new family." Sophia, hearing this, realized that in front of her was a woman who would never accept her. Nicole was completely caught up in her own ambitions and pride. "Don't you dare bother me. I've caught David, the CEO, and you're not going to stop me." Nicole's words sounded like a cold warning, as if she was trying to consolidate her victory. Sophia realized that her brother was trapped in someone else's ambitions, but what could she do on this day other than try not to overshadow him? "You're just leeching David, aren't you?" Nicole continued, her words becoming even more caustic. "I'm sure your gift is worth about $7, right?" Sophia finally couldn't help herself and replied, although her voice remained calm. "A gift for $70,000. I think you will be pleased to receive him." Nicole's face changed slightly, and for a moment her self-confidence wavered. $70,000, she asked in surprise. "I'm sorry, but it's too late now," Sophia said, trying to leave. Nicole suddenly froze. "Wait. Why do you even have that kind of money? That's the money you took from David, isn't it?" Sophia turned around. Her face remained calm, but her voice became firmer. "No, Nicole. I own a company that manufactures equipment with a worldwide reputation. My company earns $700 million a year. A $70,000 gift doesn't mean much to me." Nicole was stunned. Sophia felt her heart beat faster at her brother's words. He, who was always so calm and balanced, suddenly turned out to be so protective and categorical. There was an unwavering determination in his voice, and Sophia, standing next to him, felt a feeling of gratitude grow in her chest. David continued to speak with a confident and firm tone that she had never heard before. "I will spend my money and my time on David and my happiness," Sophia continued, watching Nicole closely. "To be honest, I don't approve of this marriage. I cannot accept a man who is so contemptuous of those who stand next to David. A man who reacts so aggressively to money." Her voice was calm, but filled with a firmness that Nicole hadn't expected to hear. "Stop raising your voice." Nicole snapped sharply, trying to regain control of the situation. Her face paled, and fear of what might happen flashed in her eyes. "It's your fault that you were deceived." But at that moment, David appeared next to them, his eyes full of surprise and disappointment. He looked at Nicole with cold surprise. "What's going on?" he asked, and his voice no longer sounded as soft as before. "It's nothing," Nicole quickly interjected, trying to hide her nervousness. "We were just talking." "No, it's not," David said, his gaze shifting to his sister, and he noticed the tension in her face. He already knew that something had gone wrong. "I just wanted to support you, to be there for you." "Nicole, what did you say to my sister Sophia?" Nicole flinched at his question, but tried to maintain her arrogance. "I didn't do anything." "Why are you so angry, David?" "I don't care if you're after my money or not." Her voice sounded softer now, as if she wanted to settle the conflict without bringing it to the point of no return. But David didn't relent. His words sounded like a sentence. "It's my responsibility, and even if we ever break up, I won't be angry. But what I won't forgive is disrespect for my sister Sophia." Sophia, who was standing nearby, was surprised by this unexpected turn. She had always seen her brother calm and diplomatic, but now he showed determination and strength that she had not expected. His voice, as well as his behavior, became a protective shield behind which she could hide. Nicole, feeling that she was losing control of the situation, hesitated slightly. She was still trying to regain lost ground. "Okay, then she can come to the wedding, right? We can forget about it, David." But David replied sharply. "We don't need your permission. Do you really think Sophia will go to the wedding after you treated her so cruelly?" Sophia watched in silence, feeling the tension in the air build up. The whole day, which was supposed to be joyful and solemn, turned out to be overshadowed by Nicole's unworthy behavior. "Sophia is the most important person in my life," David continued with firmness. "I won't let anyone humiliate her, especially not the woman I'm going to spend my life with." Nicole stood as if petrified. Her face changed color from anger to complete embarrassment. She tried to say something, but the words wouldn't come out of her mouth. David, without waiting for her answer, added, "I will not marry a woman who insults my family. We're interrupting the wedding." These words hit Nicole like a bolt from the blue. She was sure of her victory, that David would never go against her, but now everything was falling apart. David continued, "Sophia and I lost our parents when we still needed them. I remember how she cried from loneliness, but at the same time she always found the strength to support me when it was hard for me. Even when she wanted to cry herself, she smiled and tried to cheer me up. I remember these moments from my childhood." Sophia was deeply moved by her brother's words. She remembered how she comforted him as a little girl, how she did everything possible to give him hope, despite her own worries. "Do you remember that?" Sophia asked softly, her voice barely audible. "Of course I remember," David replied, and his voice softened, returning to its usual warmth. "How could I forget that you held back your tears for me? You were always there for me when I was feeling bad. And that smile of yours." He paused, lost in memories, and then continued. "So when work gets unbearably difficult, I think about your smile, Sophia. She helps me move on." Nicole stood aside, realizing that her attempts to manipulate the situation had failed. Not only was David not going to marry her, but he put his sister above everything else. "I will never forgive anyone who insults someone as important as Sophia," David added with cold determination. "You should apologize to her." Nicole looked down, realizing that her tactics were no longer working. I looked at Michael in surprise. It all happened so suddenly that my thoughts were in a complete mess. How did he end up here? And why now? His appearance seemed to disrupt the fragile order of events. "Wait, Michael," I said, a little puzzled. "Why are you here?" He seemed to sense my confusion, and a shadow of awkwardness flickered across his face. Michael coughed, trying to pull himself together, and said, "I'm sorry you had to see such an unpleasant scene, Sophia," he said, a little embarrassed, but the seriousness of his tone was obvious. "But I was also shocked to learn that you are David's dear sister." He paused as if he wasn't sure how to continue, but then exhaled and said, "I have a relationship with you, Sophia, and I want to marry you. Therefore, I ask for your consent and, of course, your brother's permission." These words came out so suddenly and sharply that I was speechless for a moment. Everything that was happening around seemed unreal. Michael, who had always been so reserved, suddenly started talking about marriage. I looked at David, but he just shook his head and said with a slight sigh, "Typical of Michael. He speaks as he is, without preface." Anna, who was standing next to her, could not resist commenting, and with a wide smile added, "So, Sophia is marrying Michael." Everyone around immediately cheered up. The atmosphere became heated, but at the same time there was something warm in the air, as if the tension began to gradually subside. I couldn't help but smile when Anna tried to defuse the situation. "But I trust you, Michael," David finally said, looking straight into Michael's eyes. "I know you'll take care of Sophia." Why did everyone suddenly become so happy? David muttered thoughtfully, looking at all of us as if wondering how things had changed so quickly. Michael, clearly feeling the need to speak directly and wasting no time, said with sincerity in his voice, "David, I promise to dedicate my life to making Sophia happy. I won't let you down, please. Let me marry her." David looked at him, his eyes narrowed slightly, as if he was still processing this information. "And you're saying that here, right now?" David, still slightly puzzled, continued to process his friend's words. After all, Michael was not only his close friend, but also the CEO of a large company, and now he declares his feelings for his sister. Nicole, who had been watching the proceedings with a seemingly detached air, suddenly intervened. "Wait a minute, so this woman is the girlfriend of the CEO of our company? And is her brother David?" Her voice was full of disbelief and surprise, as if she couldn't believe she was in this position. Nicole looked at me again, and her voice became a little softer, but there was still irritation in it. "This is incredible. But even if it's a stroke of luck, Sophia has worked hard to achieve all of this. She used her mind and worked hard to succeed, and don't you dare diminish her achievements by calling it just luck." Her voice sounded a little more confident now, but there was also arrogance in every word she said. She turned to Michael and added, defiantly now, "And by the way, Sophia has just become my threat. You know what it means to insult the woman you're going to marry, right?" Michael, abandoning his calm and restrained tone, replied softly but firmly, "Nicole, what are you going to do? This is no longer just a personal matter. You work for a company, and its reputation is at stake. Your words are a serious problem. Such behavior will be grounds for dismissal." Nicole, who was initially full of confidence, suddenly became confused. Her arrogance turned to alarm when she realized that the consequences of her actions could be much more serious than she thought. No, just firing me would be a problem, Nicole protested, her voice turning plaintive. Please forgive me, I can't stand the thought of someone like you becoming my daughter-in-law. If you understand why you need to apologize, Michael said firmly, then you shouldn't continue this conversation. Wait, please. Nicole almost screamed, her tone full of despair. If you break off the engagement and I get fired, it will be a huge problem for me. How can I live if this happens? You can look for another job, Michael replied calmly. I'm done with you, Nicole. But you still want to help me get into your company? Her voice shook with desperation as she tried to figure out what else to do. Nicole turned to David, the last hope in her eyes. David, please. You can help me get a job, right? We're almost a family. Can't you help me? But David shook his head, his gaze remained steady. Nicole, you really don't understand. After all that has happened, no one will take you into my company. It's not about family ties. It's all about trust and respect. Nicole's face gradually turned red from panic as the gravity of her situation began to sink in. She clearly hadn't expected this turn of events and was now trying to find at least some loophole. I didn't mean to offend anyone, she stammered, struggling to find the words. I just said the wrong thing. It was a mistake. Michael stared at her intently, his face still stern and serious. Nicole, this is not just a mistake. It was a huge mistake, his voice was firm but restrained. I am used to facing condemnation, but you are the first person who speaks to me so directly and sharply. Nicole cringed a little under his gaze, as if she realized that her usual manipulative style of communication was no longer working. It was a shock to me, Michael continued, but now I realize that there are people who really think the way you do. It's sad, but it's true. Nicole, as if grasping at the last hope, opened her eyes wide and asked, her voice trembling. So you'll forgive me? Michael shook his head, and a shadow of regret flickered in his eyes. No, I can't forgive you. Who wouldn't be upset to hear such words addressed to themselves? Imagine if someone talked to you like that, would you be happy? Nicole looked down, her voice barely audible. If it were me, I probably would have answered even more sharply. The words barely escaped her lips, and there was deep remorse in them, although perhaps it was just an attempt to mitigate the consequences. Well, Michael sighed, looking at her with mild sympathy. It's not going to be easy for you from now on, but I wish you luck. He turned away, making it clear that the conversation was over. However, before he left, he made one last parting remark. It is impossible to marry someone who is capable of saying such offensive things. Our parents, if they were with us, would be disappointed to see this. Sophia was there and nodded in agreement with him. It's true, she said softly, her voice calm but full of understanding. Mom was so kind, and Dad was so compassionate. Now I understand that my idea of an ideal couple was based on their example. She cast a gentle glance at Michael, and a warm smile appeared on her face. I want to have that kind of relationship with you. Michael caught her eye and smiled back. His face softened, and tenderness shone in his eyes. We can build such a relationship together, Sophia, he said with confidence. At that moment, David stepped forward, his face remained serious, but there was approval in his eyes. Michael, could you let go of Sophia's hand for a minute? David chuckled slightly, but there was determination in his tone. It seems you've already made up your mind, brother. But one more thing, you are responsible for all wedding expenses. David's words came out suddenly, and Nicole's expression changed before her eyes. Her gaze became panicked, and she whispered, "Oh, this is going to be a big blow to my wallet." Her voice was full of despair, but she didn't seem to fully realize the extent of her problem yet. Michael turned to her and said calmly, "Nicole, I think it's better to cancel the wedding." Nicole turned pale. Her face became even more tense when she heard these words. "I've already told all my friends," she stammered, her voice trembling with fear. "I wrote about the dress, the food, and the meeting place on social media. How am I supposed to explain this to everyone now?" Her eyes filled with tears, and her voice began to break into a scream. "Maybe you should delete those messages," Michael replied deadpan. "The people who see them don't even know you. Is it worth bragging to strangers about something that won't happen?" Nicole frantically looked around, as if trying to find some way out of the situation, but there was no solution. "Wait, please," she begged, her voice becoming even more desperate. "It's impossible. You have to reconsider your opinion. Please think about it." Michael sighed, looking at Nicole with an expression that was a mixture of pity and firm determination. "Nicole, you need to think about what you said. It was insulting and disrespectful. And you will have to accept the consequences of your actions." He turned to leave, but Nicole's voice broke the silence again. "Please, Michael, don't leave. Don't leave me like this. I'll do whatever it takes to fix it." She desperately reached out her hand, trying to hold him back. Michael paused for a moment, as if considering her words, but then resolutely continued walking forward, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Nicole stared after him, her face expressing a mixture of confusion and fear. She finally realized the depth of her mistakes. The reality of her situation began to penetrate her consciousness, and she realized that she had to take responsibility for all this chaos. Meanwhile, Sophia and David watched with a sense of relief. The silence hanging over the situation seemed to them the end of a long and difficult stage. They knew that their family would change from that moment on. But they also understood that these changes were necessary. Sophia took Michael's hand and felt a surge of hope. Yes, there were difficulties ahead, but she believed that together they could overcome any obstacles. Sophia and Michael sat down together, wrapped in the warmth of the passing day. The sunset filled the room with soft light, reflecting in the windows and drawing bizarre shadows on the walls. After the events of that day, silence seemed like a particularly valuable gift. "I'm so proud of you, Michael," Sophia said softly, her voice filled with gentleness and tenderness. She leaned closer to him, her fingers lightly touching his arm. "You did the right thing. Standing up for what you believe in, even when it's difficult, takes a lot of courage." Michael turned his head to Sophia, his eyes glistening with emotion. He smiled, hugging her tightly, as if he didn't want to let her go. "I couldn't have done it without you," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "You've been a pillar of support for me in all this. Your support has been invaluable to me, Sophia." She smiled back tenderly, feeling their bond grow stronger with every passing moment. Together they sat by the window, looking at the golden pink sunset, which seemed to symbolize a new beginning in their lives. "We have a long way to go," Sophia said, snuggling a little closer to Michael. "But I am ready for anything, knowing that we will walk along it together." "Me too," he agreed, bending slightly to kiss the top of her head. "We left the past behind. Now we have a whole life ahead of us." There was a quiet confidence in their hearts. They knew that, despite all the trials, love and determination would help them cope with any difficulties. Suddenly, a light knock on the door broke the silence. David, Sophia's younger brother, stood in the doorway, smiling slightly and raising his eyebrows. "Oh, I'm sorry if I'm interrupting," he said, but there was no hint of embarrassment in his voice. "I just wanted to remind you that we have an important event ahead of us." Sophia looked at Michael with a slight smile, and then back at David. "We're going to have an engagement party for the two of you," David announced enthusiastically. "But, of course, not just an engagement. It will be a surprise for everyone." "A surprise?" Sophia asked with slight embarrassment. Oh, yes, David continued, clearly enjoying his intrigue. What was supposed to be a simple, modest wedding will turn into a real celebration. Michael and Sophia exchanged surprised glances, but before they could say anything, David added, "Come on, let's go, my princess. We have to get ready." Sophia laughed, although she was still a little worried. Everything was happening so fast, and it seemed like things were starting to get out of control. When they arrived at the place of the celebration, everything was arranged at the highest level. Many of their colleagues and friends had already gathered, and the atmosphere was filled with joy and delight. But suddenly, out of the blue, David, the same cheerful and energetic brother who always seemed cheerful, began to cry. Tears flowed down his cheeks, and although it was unexpected and funny for some, others, on the contrary, felt the touching moment. Sophia walked up to David and touched his shoulder, asking, "What happened? Why are you crying?" "These are tears of joy," he replied, trying to hold back his sobs. "I'm just so happy for both of you." These words touched Sophia to the depths of her soul. Their engagement, although unexpectedly a surprise, turned into an event that brought happiness to everyone. The guests were pleased to see Michael and Sophia beaming with love and support, surrounded by friends and family. Meanwhile, Nicole, who once dreamed of her own fame and fortune, was kicked out of the meeting place. Her grandiose plans fell apart one by one. Everything she had dreamed of, becoming the CEO's wife, basking in fame and respect, now seemed out of reach. Moreover, her situation became even worse. She lost her job, and all her illusions about a luxurious life turned to dust. Her debts began to mount, and rumors quickly spread throughout the city. Someone even said that they saw her in the park, lonely and confused, lost in her thoughts. But whether it was really her, no one knew for sure. Nicole's life, which she dreamed of so much, Sophia thought bitterly, ended before it began. But her thoughts were quickly interrupted by David, who suddenly approached them with a new idea. "Hey, I've been thinking. Why don't we visit our parents' grave next weekend?" "What is it?" he asked. His voice was soft, but there was depth in it. "Do you think it would be appropriate?" Sophia asked softly, her heart constricted with excitement. Michael, who was still standing next to her, smiled at her, squeezing her hand. "I'd really like to meet your parents, even if it's just at their grave." "You're so kind, Sophia, and I'm sure your parents were just as wonderful people." David couldn't help but smile. "You're making me cry again, Michael." Everyone laughed, and thanks to this unexpected idea, they decided to spend the weekend together, honor the memory of Sophia's parents, and also start a new chapter of their lives with respect for the past and hope for the future. It was a morning when the sky seemed endless, without a single cloud, as if the world was frozen in anticipation of something important and inevitable. I looked at the blue expanse above us and felt peace seep into my soul. In that simple moment, when everything was breathing silence, I realized how much my brother meant to me. He recently broke off his engagement, and it was a difficult ordeal for him. But despite this, his habitual cheerfulness remained with him, like a ray of light in dark times. It comforted me. Seeing him strong and smiling after all he had been through filled my heart with hope. I sincerely believed that one day a wonderful person would enter his life, who would make him the happiest person in the world. He deserved it more than anyone else, a man who always gave himself entirely for the sake of others, without demanding anything in return. I remembered all those moments when he was around. How many times has he taken care of me, helping, supporting, comforting? He was someone I could always lean on. And now, standing next to him, watching his eyes turn to the sky, I felt inexpressibly grateful for everything he had done for me. "You've always been more than just a brother to me," I thought to myself. "You were my guide through life, my support and protection." And even though I didn't always say it out loud, I always appreciated it. His every gesture, every smile was filled with kindness and care. And now, when we were planning our visit to my parents' grave, I realized how significant this moment would be. It was not just an act of respect for those who had left, but also an opportunity to reflect on where we came from, who we were, and who those who loved and raised us were. Michael and I decided that this visit is something deeply personal and important for all of us. I already felt how this experience would bring us closer together, how it would make us rethink many things in life. And there was no place for sadness in it. It was about the true connection and love that lived in our hearts, no matter what. Michael was my refuge, but a brother. He was the one who always walked by my side, no matter the circumstances. There were so many difficulties in his life, but he met them with a smile and never let anything break him. I admired his resilience and believed that one day he would be truly happy. It's just a matter of time before someone sees what an incredible person he is and brings him the joy he deserves. My thoughts went back to the past, to the moments when my brother sacrificed everything he had for me. He always put my needs first, making sure that I had everything I needed to succeed. He was my hero, even though he never wore a robe or waved a sword. It was just that his presence made everything possible. I couldn't imagine my life without his support. The sky above was huge and endless, as was my gratitude to him. As he stood there, gazing thoughtfully at the clear blue sky, I silently prayed that he would know how important he was to me. So that I know that every day when I see his smile, I feel calm and strong. This visit to our parents' grave will not only be a tribute to them, but also a reminder that we are a family, no matter what happens. We will walk this path together. No matter what difficulties we face, we will support each other. I looked at my brother and Michael, and a feeling of deep peace spread over me. It was a moment when I realized the importance of family and the strong bonds that bind us. This day will be something that will stay with us forever. We will remember him not only for what we did, but also for the way we did it, with love, respect, and support for each other. And when we stand at the grave, I know that our hearts will be full, not of sadness, but of gratitude that we have each other.